One of the most common struggles that widows face after the death of their husband is the overwhelming feeling of loneliness. I would even say that this is the number one struggle. I don't think I've met a widow yet that hasn't shared with me how lonely she feels since her husband passed away. So, other than the obvious reasons about why, I'm glad that you're here because we're going to talk about that in this video today and how understanding those reasons can help you make sense more of what you're feeling. And stick around to the end because we're going to talk about how to find comfort in the midst of that loneliness. Before we dive into the reasons behind the loneliness, I want to start out just by looking at the definition of what the dictionary defines loneliness as. And so we know what it means, but I think that it's helpful to start there. According to the dictionary, it says that loneliness is being without company, cut off from others, not frequented. That's a hard word to say, frequented by human beings. You're sad from being alone, producing a feeling of bleakness or desolation. So, according to these definitions, it would make sense that the solution to loneliness is being with other people. But we know that that's not true, that you can be surrounded by other people and still feel lonely, especially in widowhood. And so that's what we're going to talk about next because there is a uniqueness to the marriage bond like no other relationship that exists. To understand the nature of the marriage bond, let's go back to the beginning and take a look at Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis and see what that has to say. So this is from Genesis 2 20 through 24. It says that, but for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up its place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib or part he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. So, according to God's ordained design, they are no longer two entities, Adam and Eve, but they are now one. No more two individuals, but God considers them as one, as a married couple. And when you think about that, this is truly a profound mystery because there's no other relationship described in this way. You cannot be one with your children. You cannot be one with your friends. You cannot be one with your parents or a casual relationship. Only in the bonds of marriage can you become one with another individual. So when God looks at you and your husband, he sees you as a unity of one. And that is a special union, and it is a covenant where he joins us together and we become one flesh. So it's God's design and it's a good design. And when your husband is no longer here and that is broken and you're separated by death from your husband, it makes sense that you would feel so isolated and alone because truly a part of you is missing. Not only do you feel lonely because of that oneness that we just talked about that you shared with your husband, but it's also because of the loss of the shared life that you had together with him. However many years that you were married, doesn't matter if it was a lot of years or even a few, you had routines with your husband. They were just a normal part of your everyday life. Things like just waking up and going about your day, going to work and getting those sweet texts from him. I know I miss those from my husband. Eating your meals together and going to bed at night, attending church services together, hosting family get togethers, going on vacation, having children, raising them, being mom and dad, and the roles that you played. All of those thousands of special moments that you shared with your husband, they suddenly feel lost. Nothing is normal about your life. Everything changed the day he left. He was your support, the person you talked to when you had a bad day. He was your travel companion and your forever date night. He made you laugh and he made you cry, if we're honest, and frustrated you at times. But even still, even through all of that, all the highs and lows, you shared an intimacy with him alone, and it was your story together. And so suddenly, all of that day to day existence that you were used to, it's just gone and flipped upside down. It's hard to know what to do with yourself and how to live in a world that just doesn't make sense. Believe me, I get it. I have felt that way. That's because there's an irreplaceable bond, irreplaceable nature of that bond that you shared with your husband. And now there's just an emptiness in your life where his presence should be. And nothing can fill that void, nor anything should fill that void. So, of course, widow, that you feel lonely without your husband. He was your person, and now you're left here without him, trying to figure things out and how to live this life that you don't recognize or understand. So, loneliness is to be expected, and you're not weak and you're not failing. You're grieving. Truly, the hardest loss that I know of there is to deal with. And so, widow, if you're feeling lonely, know that you're normal and this is part of your healing process and you adjusting to a life you never asked for. So far, we've talked about how loneliness comes from the loss of the oneness that you shared with your husband. And not only that, but also from the shared life that you had together. But this next truth, it might be the most difficult part of loneliness and something we don't talk about enough. And that is the feeling that you're misunderstood. If we think back to that definition of loneliness that we talked about earlier and how you can feel alone even when you're surrounded by other people, this is the reason why. So loneliness, it's often because you, the widow, the griever, you feel alone in what you feel. Like no one understands what you're bearing. The void that you can't even fully explain or put into words. You might feel unseen or unheard, and bearing the weight of that just brings a deep sense of loneliness and isolation in your life. Like no one gets what your pain feels like. No one can relate to your specific thoughts and your deep heartache. And in a way, that's true. No other human can fully understand what you're going through. Even the most well-meaning, loving friends and family that you have, they aren't capable of entering into that place with you. They are limited in being able to grasp the gravity of your sorrow and your pain. And actually, they weren't meant to. There are some places and seasons in your life where they're so deep and so dark that only God can go there with you. But here's the good news, widow, that God can go with you where no one else can in your grief. That's because he knows every detail of your story, every tear, every moment you have felt like giving up and like you can't go on. He understands even what you don't. I've often felt like there are no words to adequately express how I feel. And so when you struggle with that, it can feel very isolating and lonely. But here's the truth and the hope that we have. Not only has God not missed a single detail of your sorrow and what you're going through, he is also able to speak life and compassion to you and healing to those deep places and the loneliness that you feel. He can truly comfort you like no one else can. In fact, he's called the God of all comfort because he understands it all and he can enter into your pain and sorrow, widow. And when you're understood and seen like this, it will bring you a comfort that can only come from God. He is the God that sees you. He is the God that sits with you in the pit where no one else can go, never rushing you or wanting you to get through it or get over it. And as you learn to cry out to Jesus in prayer, wrestling through your thoughts and your questions, and then invite him into your grief, he will begin to bind up what feels so broken, and he will breathe life back into you again. Being lonely as a widow does not mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you're not trusting God or that your faith is weak. And it doesn't mean that you're not thankful for the life that you had with your husband. It just means that you're normal and you're trying to process a loss so great that part of you will always have a void that cannot be filled. But here's the good news is that you can grow around it. You can begin to find new meaning and purpose as you allow your heart the freedom to mourn and express all your feelings, but do so with hope. My heart is with you, dear widow. This is not a journey any of us would choose, but I am confident of this, that God can redeem your sorrow and give you a future with meaning and joy again. And if you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. I plan to post here weekly. I'd be honored to come alongside you in your journey. And here's the truth I want you to hold on to. God isn't finished writing your story, and there is still good ahead for your life.